Hi, I'm Rachel Morgan. I'm 34, I work in IT, and if you're listening to this, maybe, just maybe, you've been the dependable one too, the one who shows up even when nobody asks. Or worse, when they expect it like it's owed. Before I go any further, do me a quick favor. Subscribe to this channel, hit that little like button, and share this with someone who's been the quiet, strong one in their family. Because what I'm about to share, it's not just my story. It's for anyone who's ever realized too late that being needed isn't the same as being loved. I used to be the person who never said no. Need someone to pick you up from SeaTac at 2 a.m. because you missed your connection? I'd be there. Moving day in the middle of a rainstorm? I'd show up with pizza and extra boxes. Sick dog? Wedding shower? Forgotten birthday cake? I was the Morgan who always had jumper cables in her trunk and a backup gift bag in her car. I never kept score. That wasn't the point. I grew up in a big, loud family in Minneapolis. 5 siblings, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen table that somehow always stretched far enough when someone brought a friend unannounced. There was laughter, shouting over each other, inside jokes that made no sense to outsiders. And for the longest time, I thought that was love. I thought I belonged. But looking back now, I wonder if I ever really did. Or if I just mistook obligation for affection. Because somewhere between childhood and adulthood, something shifted. Or maybe I was just the last to notice what had always been true. It started with small things. I offered to host game night one weekend, cleaned the apartment, bought snacks, set up the living room. Nobody came, not even a text. "Oh, I thought it was next week," Jessica, my older sister, said days later, like it was nothing. Or the time Mom changed the location for Thanksgiving from her house to Aunt Diane's and forgot to loop me in. I showed up to the wrong house with a pie and a bottle of wine, standing on the porch like a fool. I kept brushing it off. Life gets busy. Miscommunication happens. Maybe I should have double-checked, but it kept happening, over and over. And slowly, I stopped feeling like family. I started feeling like a guest, the kind people smile politely at, not because they're happy you're there, but because they don't know how to say you weren't invited in the first place. At Christmas dinner last year, I walked into the living room and the conversation just dropped. Not all the way to silence, just enough to notice. My cousin Ben gave me that tight smile, the one that arrives half a second too late. "Oh, hey, didn't know you were coming." That sentence, "didn't know you were coming," it lodged itself somewhere deep in my chest like a frozen pebble. And yet I kept showing up. I wish I could tell you why. Loyalty, habit, hope, maybe all three. Or maybe I was just scared that if I stopped showing up, they wouldn't even notice. But that's what brings me to the moment everything began to change, a moment I didn't see coming, one that caught me mid-laugh at a party I helped fund, surrounded by people who still managed to make me feel invisible. That night, something in me shifted, not loudly, not with rage, just a quiet, undeniable click. But we'll get there soon enough. Right now, I want to tell you how it started, with a woman who thought that showing up was enough, who believed that if she gave everything, someday someone would look up and say, "Thank you, Rachel. We see you." They never did. Not until I stopped saying yes. You ever notice how the small things pile up? Not all at once, but in quiet, forgettable ways. Like dust gathering in the corners of a room you used to love, until one day the sunlight hits just right, and suddenly, it's all you can see. For me, it started with game night. I'd just moved into my new apartment in Ballard. Nothing fancy, but I'd finally splurged on that walnut coffee table I'd been eyeing and wanted people to see it. Not for the table, but for the life I was building. So I sent out a group text. "Game night this Friday. Pizza's on me, bring wine and bad decisions." Only, no one showed. At first, I thought maybe I'd gotten the day wrong. I checked the thread 3 times. Friday, 7 p.m. I'd cleaned, lit candles, even made garlic knots from scratch. My kitchen still smelled like them when I went to bed alone at 10:30. 2 days later, I saw Jessica at Mom's house. She barely looked up from her phone. "Sorry about Friday," she said flatly. We ended up going to that trivia thing at Nolan's bar, totally spaced on your invite. I laughed a little, tried to shrug it off. It's fine. Garlic knots make great leftovers. She didn't respond, just tapped away on her screen. I wish I could say that moment was the exception, but it became the pattern. When I arrived at family brunch a few weekends later, Megan blinked like I was a ghost. Oh, I didn't know you were coming. I was holding a fruit salad the size of a mixing bowl. Mom sent the invite, I said. She probably forgot you were looped in, she replied, not unkindly, just casually, like forgetting me was reasonable. And still, I told myself it wasn't personal. People are busy, Rach, I whispered to myself while drying my hands in my mom's powder blue guest bathroom. You're being sensitive. It's nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like standing in the middle of a crowd and realizing the conversation had moved on without you. At Jessica's baby shower, I brought a handmade quilt. Took me 3 weeks to finish it. I never saw it again after that day. No thank you, no photo of it draped over the crib. She tagged everyone else in the post-shower Instagram slideshow. I wasn't mentioned once. Then came the 4th of July. I was driving home from work when I spotted a Facebook post from Aunt Diane. A backyard grill out, sparklers, the cousins' kids in matching red, white, blue outfits. My parents were in the background, holding plates of ribs. I hadn't even known there was a party. I zoomed in on the photo. Jessica was there, Megan too. Uncle Mike, who hates fireworks but shows up anyway for the potato salad. Even my ex-boyfriend's little sister, weirdly, was smiling in the background. But not me. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even an afterthought. Later that week, I asked Mom about it during a phone call. My voice shook, even though I tried to keep it light. Hey, I saw some photos from the 4th. Looked like a full house. She hesitated. Oh, yeah, it was kind of a last-minute thing. Just immediate family, you know? Right. My throat went dry. Immediate. She changed the subject. Something about her new rose bushes. And I just let her. I didn't push. That's what I did back then. I didn't push. I didn't ask why I kept getting forgotten, why I always had to reach out first, why the invites never included my name unless I inserted myself. I just smiled when I wasn't smiling inside. Because I kept hoping, maybe the next time will be different. Maybe I'll walk in and someone will light up at the sight of me. Maybe I'll be part of the inside jokes again. Maybe I'll belong. But deep down, I was starting to realize I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. And the worst part? I was the one pretending it was okay. If there was one person in my family who never made me feel like an afterthought, it was Uncle Bob. He wasn't flashy, didn't talk much, wore the same brown Carhartt jacket since the 90s, but when he asked how I was doing, he actually waited for the answer. Not just a polite nod, he listened. That's rare in my family. So when Aunt Linda texted me about his retirement party, something about being short on the venue deposit, I didn't hesitate. Hey, Rach, she wrote. We're a bit tight on the VFW booking for Bob's send-off. Any chance you can spot the last $600? We'll pay you back after. There was no if you can, no please. Just the quiet assumption that I'd say yes. And I did. Sure, I replied. Send me the link. No follow-up. No thank you. Just silence, like they knew I'd handle it. I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. But I brushed it off. Uncle Bob deserved a good night, and if I had to make that happen behind the scenes, so be it. The night of the party, I got to the VFW hall early. The place smelled like folding chairs, stale beer, and Lysol. I helped string up a massive silver banner that said 42 years, no back pain, yet. I arranged centerpieces Linda had thrown together, mason jars and battery-powered candles. It was humble, but it had heart. Bob arrived in his usual flannel shirt and jeans, looking overwhelmed when everyone cheered. When he saw me, he smiled wide and pulled me in for a real hug. Not the one-arm pat most of my family gives, the kind of hug that says, I see you. Couldn't have done this without you, kiddo, he whispered. And for a few hours, it actually felt like family again. People laughed. We played classic rock too loud. Someone spilled sangria on the welcome table. Bob's old factory buddies told ridiculous stories about forklift mishaps and pranks with rubber chickens. There was dancing. Bad, wonderful dancing. I found myself laughing with Megan and even Jessica, sipping wine from plastic cups. For a moment, I stopped questioning everything. I wasn't doing math in my head, how much I'd paid, who thanked me, who hadn't. I just was. And then I opened my big mouth. We were by the snack table, Megan cracking up about some guy she'd ghosted after 2 dates, and I, feeling light and maybe a little tipsy, said casually, "I'll bring dessert to the family barbecue tomorrow. What time should I get there?" The air changed. Megan blinked, tilted her head. "Oh, you weren't invited?" Her voice wasn't cruel, just confused. I laughed, too quickly. "Funny. So, what time?" Jessica suddenly found the veggie tray very interesting. "I mean," Megan stammered, "I think it's more of a small thing. Just close family." "Yeah," Jessica added, not looking at me. "Mom and Dad just wanted to keep it, low-key. Just the core group." Core group. It hit harder than I expected, like someone had drawn a circle and I was officially outside of it. Then Aunt Linda walked by, sipping a rum and Coke, and Megan turned to her, grinning. "Show her the photo." Linda didn't even ask. She just held out her phone, scrolling through picture after picture, tables set up in someone's backyard, a massive cake that said Family BBQ 2023, kids running through sprinklers. Everyone was there. My parents, Jessica's twins, Megan's fiancé, even Aunt Carol, who lives 4 states away and always complains about traveling. Somehow, even my old childhood babysitter had made the cut. I wasn't in a single frame. I just nodded, smiled, and excused myself like I suddenly remembered a phone call. I made my way toward the back of the room, my heart hammering, not from sadness this time. Something colder, sharper, not pain, clarity, that barbecue. The venue they booked? Yeah, I'd paid the deposit. 3 months ago, when Linda had texted asking if she could use my card, because your payment history's cleaner and they won't flag it. I said yes. The reservation confirmation was still in my inbox. And now, I wasn't even worth an invitation. If there was one person in my family who never made me feel like an afterthought, it was Uncle Bob. He wasn't flashy, didn't talk much, wore the same brown Carhartt jacket since the 90s. But when he asked how I was doing, he actually waited for the answer. Not just a polite nod. He listened. That's rare in my family. So when Aunt Linda texted me about his retirement party, something about being short on the venue deposit, I didn't hesitate. "Hey, Rach," she wrote, "we're a bit tight on the VFW booking for Bob's send-off. Any chance you can spot the last $600? We'll pay you back after." There was no "if you can," no please, just the quiet assumption that I'd say yes. And I did. "Sure," I replied. "Send me the link." No follow-up, no thank you, just silence, like they knew I'd handle it. I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting, but I brushed it off. Uncle Bob deserved a good night, and if I had to make that happen behind the scenes, so be it. The night of the party, I got to the VFW hall early. The place smelled like folding chairs, stale beer, and Lysol. I helped string up a massive silver banner that said, 42 years, no back pain, yet. I arranged centerpieces Linda had thrown together, mason jars and battery-powered candles. It was humble, but it had heart. Bob arrived in his usual flannel shirt and jeans, looking overwhelmed when everyone cheered. When he saw me, he smiled wide and pulled me in for a real hug. Not the one-arm pat most of my family gives, the kind of hug that says, "I see you." "Couldn't have done this without you, kiddo," he whispered. And for a few hours, it actually felt like family again. People laughed. We played classic rock too loud. Someone spilled sangria on the welcome table. Bob's old factory buddies told ridiculous stories about forklift mishaps and pranks with rubber chickens. There was dancing. Bad, wonderful dancing. I found myself laughing with Megan and even Jessica, sipping wine from plastic cups. For a moment, I stopped questioning everything. I wasn't doing math in my head. How much I'd paid, who thanked me, who hadn't. I just was. And then I opened my big mouth. We were by the snack table, Megan cracking up about some guy she'd ghosted after 2 dates, and I, feeling light and maybe a little tipsy, said casually, "I'll bring dessert to the family barbecue tomorrow. What time should I get there?" The air changed. Megan blinked, tilted her head. "Oh, you weren't invited?" Her voice wasn't cruel, just confused. I laughed, too quickly. "Funny. So, what time?" Jessica suddenly found the veggie tray very interesting. "I mean," Megan stammered, "I think it's more of a small thing, just close family." "Yeah," Jessica added, not looking at me. "Mom and Dad just wanted to keep it, low-key, just the core group." Core group. It hit harder than I expected, like someone had drawn a circle and I was officially outside of it. Then Aunt Linda walked by, sipping a rum and Coke, and Megan turned to her, grinning. "Show her the photo." Linda didn't even ask. She just held out her phone, scrolling through picture after picture. Tables set up in someone's backyard, a massive cake that said Family BBQ 2023, kids running through sprinklers. Everyone was there. My parents, Jessica's twins, Megan's fiancé, even Aunt Carol, who lives 4 states away and always complains about traveling. Somehow even my old childhood babysitter had made the cut. I wasn't in a single frame. I just nodded, smiled, and excused myself like I suddenly remembered a phone call. I made my way toward the back of the room, my heart hammering. Not from sadness this time. Something colder, sharper, not pain, clarity. That barbecue? The venue they booked? Yeah, I'd paid the deposit. 3 months ago, when Linda had texted asking if she could use my card because your payment history's cleaner and they won't flag it, I said yes. The reservation confirmation was still in my inbox, and now I wasn't even worth an invitation. I don't remember walking back to my seat after Aunt Linda's photo slideshow. My feet moved, but my brain was somewhere else, looping through every ride I'd given, every birthday gift I'd remembered, every silent yes I'd said when no one else stepped up. I found myself at the bar, ordering a whiskey neat. I hadn't touched hard liquor since New Year's Eve, but tonight I needed something that burned going down. The music had shifted to something slow and nostalgic. Fleetwood Mac, I think. People swayed near the dance floor, drinks in hand, laughing, unaware that something inside me had cracked. Quietly. Cleanly. I sat at a small table in the back, far enough from the crowd that no one noticed I'd checked out. That barbecue, the one I wasn't invited to, it was being held at Golden Lake Park, the picnic shelter, the one with the big shade awning and access to electricity. I remembered because I booked it, paid the $1,750 deposit myself 3 months ago. Linda had texted me one afternoon. "Hey Rach, would you mind using your card for the venue? The parks department is weird about flagged accounts and yours is always clean." I'd replied with a thumbs up and handled the rest. Because of course I did. I didn't even think twice about it. I didn't ask to be reimbursed. I didn't need a parade, just maybe an invite. But they didn't even bother switching the reservation out of my name. It was still under Rachel Morgan. The thought made my jaw tighten. I sipped my drink and stared at the melting ice. Outside, someone popped a balloon, and for a second it sounded like a firecracker. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out, because it wasn't rage that filled me. It was something colder, sharper, resolve. When I looked up, I saw Bob waving at me from across the room. I managed a small smile and lifted my glass in return. He didn't know. He couldn't have, and I wouldn't ruin his night. So I stood up, tossed back the rest of my whiskey, and went to help fold up chairs as the party wound down. I collected plastic cups and packed away half-eaten dessert trays like nothing was wrong. When I hugged Uncle Bob goodbye, he held on a second longer than usual. "You're one of the good ones, Rachel. I mean that." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I appreciate that, Uncle Bob. Really. And I meant it." Then I drove home in silence, parked outside my apartment, and opened my email. There it was. The reservation confirmation from Seattle Parks and Rec, time-stamped and clear. 1 click. Cancel reservation. A little warning message popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel this booking? Refunds may take 5 to 7 business days." I clicked yes. That was it. No drama. No announcement, just silence. Let them wake up tomorrow to an empty field. No tables, no electricity, no permit. I closed my laptop, brushed my teeth, and went to bed. And for the first time in a long time, I slept like a rock. The morning after the cancellation, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. At first, I ignored it. The sunlight filtered in through my blinds, and for once, the silence in my apartment felt like comfort, not loneliness. But the buzzing didn't stop. I finally rolled over and checked the screen. 11 missed calls, 8 voicemails, 27 texts. Jessica, Mom, Aunt Linda. A few numbers I didn't recognize, probably Megan's friends or someone's +1, now standing in a park with no tables and no clue. I didn't open anything yet, not out of fear, out of calm. I already knew what had happened. I knew the picnic shelter would be locked. I knew the staff at Golden Lake Park would be polite but firm. No reservation under that name, ma'am. Yes, someone canceled it yesterday. No, we can't override that. By noon, the messages had doubled. I finally opened the first voicemail from Linda, her voice shrill and breathless. Rachel, the park says we don't have the reservation. Did you cancel it? Was it a mistake? Call me back, please. Then Mom's voice, tired and confused. Why would you cancel the venue, honey? Everyone's here. They're making us leave. What's going on? And finally, Jessica. Just 3 words. Real mature, Rachel. That one made me laugh. Out loud. Real mature? They invited everyone except me to an event I paid for, and I was the immature one? I put my phone face down, made myself a cup of coffee, and turned on some lo-fi jazz. No panic, no pacing, just peace. I pictured the chaos. Aunt Diane trying to negotiate with the park staff, Cousin Zach fumbling with fold-out chairs in someone's driveway, Jessica waving her arms in frustration while Mom hovered nearby, clutching her sun hat. They'd scramble, of course, throw something together last minute, but it wouldn't be their perfect barbecue, not without the tables, the speakers, the power outlets, the covered pavilion, the bounce house for the kids. All of that had come with the reservation they never thanked me for. Around 4 p.m., I finally picked up my phone again. One photo caught my eye. It was a driveway, cracked concrete, patchy grass. A sad little grill sat off-center with 3 people crowding around it, smoke billowing into someone's face. Paper plates, lukewarm soda, folding chairs in a half-circle. It looked miserable. Then came the group shot. Megan had sent it to the family group chat. The caption read, "Still made it work, had family first." But I wasn't in a single frame. Again. Everyone else was there. My parents, my nieces, the cousins I grew up playing hide-and-seek with, even old family friends I hadn't seen since high school. They were smiling, raising their red Solo cups like nothing had gone wrong, like I hadn't vanished from their lives, and they hadn't noticed. I stared at the photo for a long time. It wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't anger either. It was confirmation. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. They missed the invisible hands that made things run, the wallet that covered surprise deposits, the emotional sponge that soaked up tension so no one else had to. But me, as a person? They'd deleted me from the album before I ever stopped showing up, and now I was just catching up. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rant to a friend or post some cryptic quote on social media. I didn't even reread the messages flooding in with emojis and confusion and half-baked guilt. I just sat. The windows were open. A breeze moved through my living room, tugging at the corner of a dish towel I'd forgotten on the counter. The city outside was quiet, unusually so for a summer weekend in Seattle. It was like the world was holding its breath, waiting for me to decide what I'd be next. I curled up on the couch with my knees tucked beneath me and stared at the dark TV screen. My reflection looked tired, older somehow, not from age, but from where? From the slow, steady erosion of being needed but never considered. And then, click. It wasn't loud, not dramatic, just a shift, like something inside finally stopped bending and locked into place. I stood up, walked over to my kitchen drawer, and pulled out a crumpled copy of the park permit. It was still in my name. No one had even bothered to ask me to change it or take ownership. They just used me and assumed I wouldn't notice. But I had, and I was done pretending otherwise. The following morning, I answered one call. Just one. Uncle Bob. I respected him. He was never part of the exclusion, never sharp or dismissive. And maybe a part of me needed to hear at least one voice that didn't carry barbed undertones. He picked up after half a ring. "Rachel," he said, his voice low. "I figured you might call." I didn't apologize. I didn't soften my tone. "I saw your message," I said. A beat of silence. Then, "So, was it you? The cancellation?" "Yes." I could almost hear him exhale through the line, not anger, not disappointment, something closer to recognition. "Well," he said slowly, "can't say they didn't have it coming." I leaned against the wall, twirling the phone cord around my fingers. It caused a mess, I know. "Sure did." He chuckled without humor. "But maybe some things needed to get messy." We let that sit. Neither of us rushed to fill the silence. Then he added, more gently, "You've always been the one holding it all together, Rach. I didn't realize how much weight you were carrying until it snapped." That line hit something tender. "It didn't snap," I said. "It settled, like a house finally creaking into its foundation." Another pause. "I like that," he said quietly. "You're not mad?" I took a breath. "No, I'm not mad. Oh, I'm not. I'm just done with pretending, with carrying everything and still being the one left off the guest list." His voice cracked just slightly. "You matter, Rachel. You always have." I believed that he believed it, but belief without action? It's just comfort for the speaker. "Thanks, Bob," I said. "I needed to hear that. I just wish it had come before everything broke." "Me too." We didn't say goodbye. Just let the line go quiet, like the truth had already spoken enough. That was the first conversation I'd had in years where I didn't shrink myself to keep the peace, and it wouldn't be the last. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight pouring through my bedroom window and the unmistakable silence of a phone that had lost its patience. No alarms, no buzzes, no digital chaos. I didn't check my phone right away. I made scrambled eggs. I watered the plant in the corner that had somehow survived my neglect. I played a jazz vinyl that popped and crackled like it had secrets. By the time I finally flipped over my phone, it was noon. 43 messages, 18 missed calls, 6 voicemails. I took a sip of coffee, leaned back against the kitchen counter, and scrolled. Mom had left 2 voicemails. "Rachel, honey, I'm standing here at Golden Lake, and the ranger says our reservation doesn't exist. Can you call me back?" Then, a minute later, her voice tight and rising. "Rachel, everyone is already here. There's no shade, no setup. People are asking questions. What's going on? Did you cancel this? Please call me." I didn't. Jessica's message came next. "Seriously? This is how you handle being left out? Grow up, Rachel. You made a scene without even showing up." That one made me smile. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't sent a single message. I hadn't even posted a passive-aggressive meme. But I'd still made an impact. And for once, it wasn't about being useful. It was about being missed. Not because I was convenient, but because I'd removed the one thing they'd come to rely on without ever thanking me. Me. I knew how this was playing out in real time. I could see Aunt Diane standing at the ranger kiosk, trying to Karen her way into a solution. I imagined Megan in wedges, shifting awkwardly on the gravel path while holding her toddler and a dozen napkins. Jessica pacing, fuming, phone glued to her ear as sweat streaked her mascara. Dad, silent as ever, probably just staring at the lake like it might offer answers. And my mom, God love her, trying to sweet-talk the park staff into letting them stay. But permits are permits, and mine had been canceled cleanly. I pictured the park ranger's rehearsed calm. "Sorry, ma'am. Reservation was canceled yesterday by the cardholder. Deposit has already been refunded. We have another group arriving at 3. No, you can't just set up on the lawn." I spent the rest of the afternoon doing laundry, folding towels, and listening to a podcast on setting boundaries. The irony wasn't lost on me. Around 4 p.m., I finally checked my texts again. A photo popped up from an unknown number. It showed a dozen folding chairs set up in someone's driveway, haphazard and uneven. A plastic tablecloth flapped in the wind, weighted down by condiments and a half-deflated football. Then another, 3 people crowding around a struggling grill while smoke billowed sideways into someone's drink. It looked chaotic, exhausted, embarrassed, and entirely earned. I exhaled slowly, not from triumph, but from release. They had no idea where the tables went, no idea why the power outlets weren't working. No bounce house for the kids, no shaded pavilion for Grandma's folding chair. They were scrambling. And I was calm, quiet, centered. For once, the storm wasn't inside me, it was behind me. The voicemail came in just after sunset. I was sitting on my balcony, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand, watching the sky blush into lavender over the Seattle skyline. The air smelled like grill smoke and late summer. It had been a full 24 hours since the great barbecue meltdown. My phone had been quiet for the last few hours, eerily so. No new rants from Jessica. No veiled guilt trips from Mom. No one begging me to just talk about it, except one, Uncle Bob. His message was short, almost hesitant. "Hey, Rach, when you've got a minute, give me a ring. Just want to talk, that's all." I let it sit for a while. Half an hour, maybe more. I needed to be sure I wasn't answering out of guilt or habit. Finally, I dialed. He picked up on the first ring. "Rachel," he breathed, like my name had been sitting on his chest all day. "Hey, Bob." A pause. The kind that holds weight. "I figured it was you," he said quietly. "The cancellation." I didn't deflect, didn't explain. "It was." He didn't sound angry. If anything, his voice was slower, heavier. "Well, damn." I gave a soft laugh, not amused exactly. "Just done." "Yeah, that's about the size of it." There was a rustling sound, like he'd sat down somewhere. "They didn't take it well." "I saw the photos," I said, my voice steady. "Driveway cookout." "Not exactly Martha Stewart." That made him chuckle. "Martha would have walked out." We both went quiet for a beat, the way people do when the laughter fades and the truth still lingers in the room. "You know," he said slowly, "I've been thinking about how much you've done over the years, for all of us. Birthdays, rides, picking up the slack when nobody else even noticed the slack was there." I didn't respond. I wanted to hear where this was going. "I should have said something sooner," he added, "and I should have spoken up when Linda and the others started leaving you out." I exhaled, not out of relief, more like release. "It wasn't just the barbecue, Bob. It's been years. Years of being useful, not seen, included when it was convenient, invisible when it wasn't." He didn't argue, just let my words land. "You're right," he said, voice low. "I didn't mean to be part of the problem, but silence. That's its own kind of choice, isn't it?" That part struck me. Because yes, it was. "It is," I said softly. "And I'm not mad at you, Bob, honestly. But I needed someone to see it. All of it. I needed to feel like I wasn't losing my mind." "You're not." We sat in that space, 2 people on different porches in different parts of the city, finally having the conversation no one else had the guts to start. "I'm not asking you to pick sides," I told him. "I'm just done pretending it didn't happen, that it doesn't keep happening." "I get it," he said. "I wish you weren't done, but I get it." There was something final in his voice, but not resentful, just honest. "You're one of the good ones, Rachel. You always have been." I blinked, staring out over the skyline. "Thanks," I said. "That means more than you know." We didn't drag it out. There was no neat resolution, no promises of healing family dinners or miraculous group hugs. But when we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Heard. It had been 4 days since the barbecue fiasco. The silence that followed felt intentional. Like the family didn't know what to say, so they said nothing, as if ignoring the crack would somehow seal it shut again. But then, on a Wednesday evening, just as I was about to toss my phone on the charger and crawl into bed, I got a text from Megan. Not a meme. Not a guilt trip. Not even a demand. It started with, "Hey, I know you probably don't want to hear from me." My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't open it for a full minute, but curiosity tugged harder than resistance, and when I did read it, slowly, word by word, I had to sit down. "Hey, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I wouldn't blame you. I didn't know you weren't invited to the BBQ until you said it at the party. Honestly, I just assumed you'd be there like always. That's kind of the problem, isn't it? We all assume you'll just show up, fix things, fill gaps. No one ever asks if you're okay or if you want to be there, and that's not right." I stopped reading, took a breath, then kept going. "When you walked away that night, something clicked. The room didn't feel whole without you. And I don't just mean the planning or the setup or the food. It felt like a piece of the family was gone. I think some of us know we've treated you like a backup plan. We just never said it out loud because you never pushed back. So maybe this was your push. Anyway, I just wanted you to know. I saw it, and I'm sorry." I read it twice. Not because it fixed anything. It didn't erase the years of being sidelined or the sting of watching people scroll through party photos I wasn't in. But it did confirm something I'd been quietly asking myself for too long. Was it really that bad? Or am I just imagining things? Turns out, I wasn't. And hearing that, from someone who had always been more of a quiet enabler than a direct offender, meant something. It didn't absolve her. But it gave weight to what I'd felt for so long. It gave it shape. Still, I didn't reply. Not yet. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't know what to say that wouldn't pull me back into orbit. I was still figuring out what distance looked like, what peace sounded like without background noise. Instead, I sat in the soft light of my bedroom and let myself feel the message. Not just the apology, the recognition that someone had finally said, "You weren't wrong." Sometimes that's more powerful than hearing, "I'm sorry." The days that followed felt weightless. Not like freedom exactly, more like shedding a coat I hadn't realized I'd been wearing through a heat wave. No dramatic proclamations, no "I'm cutting everyone off" speech, just quiet, deliberate disengagement. I muted the family group chat. I archived Mom's long email titled, "Let's not make this bigger than it is," without reading past the opening line. Jessica had started posting cryptic Instagram stories. "You find out who people really are when they don't get what they want." I rolled my eyes and tapped past it. The irony practically dripped off the screen, but I didn't respond. Not out of coldness, out of clarity, because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a phone to ring. I wasn't checking for invites I knew wouldn't come. I wasn't bracing for guilt. I was breathing. And more than that, I was rebuilding. It started small. I texted Chelsea from work, the one who'd invited me out for drinks at least 10 times before I finally said yes. "Still down for happy hour?" She replied in all caps. Finally, yes. That night, we laughed over fries and margaritas like we'd been friends for years. No one asked me to plan anything. No one asked me for a ride or to cover the tab. They were just happy I was there. That was new, and I liked it. A few days later, I hosted a dinner at my place. Nothing fancy, just pasta, garlic bread, and the soft glow of string lights I'd hung up for a party that never happened. This time, the chairs were full. Colleagues, a neighbor from across the hall, a friend I'd lost touch with after college who responded to an old birthday message like it was an open door. We clinked glasses and told stories, and nobody took a photo for Instagram. And still, it felt more real than any gathering I'd had with my family in years. One night, as I stood at the sink rinsing dishes, my phone buzzed again. A new number. "Hey Rachel, it's Elaine, Chelsea's friend from the coast trip. You're awesome. If you ever want to join our next weekend getaway, we'd love to have you." It was simple, uncomplicated, an invitation without strings. And that's when it hit me. All these years, I'd been working so hard to hold together a version of family that only existed when I was useful. And the moment I stopped performing, they didn't check in. They retaliated. But these people? They didn't need me to show up perfect. They just needed me to show up. I wasn't used to that, but I was learning. I smiled to myself, drying a wine glass with a towel. The kind of domestic silence that used to ache now felt warm. Peace didn't arrive like a sunrise. It crept in, soft and steady, filling the quiet spaces my family once occupied. And little by little I began to see. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of me. It was a Tuesday evening. The kind that smelled like warm concrete and fading sun when the sky hasn't quite decided whether it wants to turn gold or gray. I'd just pulled into my driveway, arms full of groceries and a tote bag half sliding off my shoulder, when I saw it. A silver Lexus, parked directly across the street from my building. I stopped mid-step. In the front seat, my mom. And next to her, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, Jessica. For a second, I thought about turning around, pretending I hadn't seen them, but my arms were full and they'd definitely seen me. Jessica was already getting out of the car, her heels clicking against the pavement like an accusation. "We need to talk," she said, arms crossed, voice flat. I let the grocery bag slide from my fingers to the curb, calmly. "This isn't the place." "You can't just ghost your family because of one mistake," she shot back. Mom got out of the car more cautiously, smoothing her cardigan like it might soften what was coming. "We didn't mean to hurt you, sweetheart, but canceling the park? That wasn't fair. You embarrassed everyone." I tilted my head, arms now crossed too. "Embarrassed? That's rich. I've been uncomfortable at your events for years, but that didn't matter until I stopped funding them." Jessica rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might sprain something. "Oh my God, Rachel, this is getting ridiculous. Just admit you overreacted and come back to the group." A laugh escaped me, dry, disbelieving. "You want me back?" I asked. "Then let's start with an apology, not a half-hearted text, a real one, in front of the whole family." Jessica scoffed, arms folded tighter. "You're joking." "I'm finally serious." Mom looked stricken, like she couldn't decide whether to plead or scold. "Sweetheart, we're family. We say things, we forget things, but we stick together." My voice came out quieter, but firmer than before. "Sticking together isn't the same as sticking around when you're not wanted." Jessica's tone shifted, a sneer creeping in. "You've really let this go to your head. You think you deserve some public ceremony just because you got your feelings hurt?" I took a step closer. "It's not about hurt feelings. It's about respect, or the complete lack of it. I was treated like furniture, there when needed, invisible the rest of the time. That's not family. That's utility." Mom stepped forward, voice softer now. "Rachel, I know we haven't always been perfect." "Perfect?" I cut in, staring straight into her eyes. "You stood there while Jessica laughed at me at Bob's party. You smiled while Aunt Linda showed off pictures from a barbecue I paid for. You've been quiet for years. That's not a flaw. That's a choice." She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Jessica huffed and shook her head. "So what? You're cutting us off now? No Christmas? No birthdays? You're going to make everything awkward for everyone?" I looked at her for a long second, letting her question hang like smoke between us. "You already did." Then I turned, walked up to my door, and slid the key into the lock. Behind me, Mom's voice wavered. "Rachel, please don't do this." I paused. "Then fix it. Own it. Apologize." And with that, I stepped inside and gently closed the door. Not slammed, not dramatic, just final. That, I think, rattled them more than any yelling ever could. The door clicked shut behind me like punctuation, final, clean, and echoing in all the right places. No screaming, no slammed fists, no "how dare you" echoing down the street. Just the low hum of my fridge, the creak of my apartment floorboards, and my own breathing. Calm, steady, mine. That night, they didn't call. No follow-up text, no barrage of guilt, nothing. The silence was startling, but it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I made tea, opened a book I'd started 3 months ago, and read the same page 3 times. Not because I was distracted, but because I was finally unwinding from years of being emotionally on call. And for the next few days, everything stayed still. No new chaos, just space. Mom didn't text again. Jessica didn't post any more barbed quotes, at least none that reached me. The group chat stayed quiet, like everyone was tiptoeing through the aftermath, waiting for someone else to fix it. They didn't know yet. I wasn't coming back with a mop. About 5 days in, I got a text. Not from Mom, not from Jessica. Uncle Bob. Hey, hosting a small dinner. Just a few people. No speeches, no drama, just food. No one from your mom's side will be there, unless you say yes first. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, unsure what to do with kindness when it came without strings. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I went to the gym, ran 3 miles, bought myself sushi, walked home through streets lit with golden dusk and thought, not about what they needed, but about what I wanted, what I was building. That night, I finally replied, only if it's at your place, and only if you promise not to bring up the others. He texted back within minutes. Deal. That dinner was everything the last few months hadn't been. No tension, no manipulation, just grilled salmon, lemon risotto, and stories about his neighbor's cat who kept sneaking into his garage. A friend from his old job joined, retired, gentle, loved crossword puzzles. No one asked me about Jessica. No one asked me to explain myself. No one needed me to be anything but Rachel. We sat on his back porch after dinner, the sky going dark around us, and for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't brace myself. I just existed. And it was enough. Later that night, I posted a photo, just me and Uncle Bob, toasting glasses of sparkling water, smiles soft and unforced. The caption read, "Sometimes your real family isn't who remembers your birthday. It's who remembers to ask if you're okay." I didn't tag anyone, but I didn't have to. Within the hour, Jessica liked the post, then unliked it, then liked it again. It was petty, yes, but it told me one thing. She saw it. And that meant more than any apology she hadn't said yet. The message came in on a Saturday morning. No greeting, no punctuation, just, "Fine. If that's what it takes, let's talk. Everyone will be there. Sunday at 4. From Jessica. It was everything I'd said I wanted. A conversation, in person, in front of the whole family, an acknowledgement. But reading it now, I felt nothing. Not relief, not anticipation, just caution. Because sometimes people don't apologize because they're sorry. They do it because they're scared of losing control. I stared at the text while the kettle whistled in the background, steam curling into the quiet of my kitchen. Did I want closure? Or did I just want them to finally hear me? I replied simply, "I'll come. But if this is for show, I'm walking out. I won't be polite this time." Jessica's response was a single thumbs up emoji. That told me everything. Sunday came with the kind of flat gray sky that makes you feel like you're walking into a waiting room instead of a house. I pulled into my parents' driveway, same white shutters, same chipped porch railing, same flower pots no one ever remembered to water. It all looked exactly the same. But I wasn't. As I walked up the steps, the door opened before I could knock. Mom stood there, pearls around her neck, smile too bright. That smile she wore for awkward church brunches and forced introductions. "Rachel," she said, her voice sweet and strained. "Come in." I stepped inside. The house smelled like roast chicken and cinnamon. Comforting, familiar, deceptive. In the living room, the usual suspects were already seated. Jessica, arms crossed and expression tight. Aunt Linda beside her, sipping something from a wine glass like it was a prop. Cousin Megan, eyes darting from person to person like she wasn't sure where she stood. Even Zach, my younger cousin, was there, thumbing at his phone. The room felt like a courtroom without a judge. No one greeted me. They just watched. Jessica stood first, like she was hosting a local town hall meeting. "Thanks for coming," she said. "We wanted to talk about everything." I didn't sit. I stayed near the doorway, arms loose at my sides. "Go on." She glanced around for support. None came, so she continued, her tone rehearsed. "We know you felt left out. Maybe we didn't realize how much you were doing behind the scenes. It wasn't intentional. But, things slipped." I raised an eyebrow. So this is the big gesture? A vague acknowledgement now that I've stopped funding birthdays and venues? Mom cleared her throat, her voice softer. That's not fair, Rachel. No? I said, voice low but sharp. Because I paid for Uncle Bob's party. Paid for the park venue. Fixed your dryer when Dad threw his back out. Spent my weekends babysitting Jessica's twins so she could go to Pilates. Should I keep going? Jessica's face twisted. Okay, we get it. You were the family handyman/wallet. Do you want a medal? That was the real Jessica. I didn't flinch. No. I wanted a seat at the table. The same respect you give each other without question. Uncle Jim finally spoke, shifting in his chair. We didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it? I asked. When you hosted a barbecue I booked and didn't invite me, when you posed for photos like I never existed, when none of you called after I stopped showing up. No one answered, just the sound of the hallway clock ticking behind me and someone coughing awkwardly into their sleeve. I scanned the room slowly. You had years to say something. Years. I gave, and when I finally stepped back, you treated me like the problem. Like I had to earn my place in a family that only called me when something needed doing. I let that sit, then added, but I figured it out. I never had a place. I was a placeholder, a utility, and now that I've stopped being that, you want me back, not to make it right, but to make it easier for you. Jessica rolled her eyes. Oh my God, you're so dramatic. I took one final step toward the center of the room. Then this is the last time you get to call me that. The last time you reduce my boundaries to drama. I turned toward the door. Wait! Mom stood, arms half raised. Don't do this. I paused, one hand on the knob. You always said family sticks together, she whispered. That we don't walk away. I looked back at her, just for a moment. Sticking together isn't love if it means silencing yourself to stay. And then I opened the door and walked out. No slam, no scene. Just a woman done asking for space in a room she already built. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't sit on the floor questioning whether I'd said too much. I didn't draft any follow-up texts or scroll through old photos of happier holidays. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea. Chamomile with honey. I put on a playlist I hadn't touched in years, something soft, acoustic, a little sad but not broken, and folded the laundry that had been waiting in a basket for 2 days. Outside, the city buzzed on like nothing had happened. But inside, everything had changed. I deleted the family group chat. I archived old voicemails from Mom. I blocked Jessica, not out of anger but for silence, for space, for healing, for peace. I didn't owe anyone a warning this time. I didn't need to explain my boundary before drawing it. I just stepped back, quietly, firmly, finally. And the strangest part? The world didn't collapse. In fact, it felt lighter. For the first time in years, no one was asking me to sacrifice my Sunday or my savings or my silence. No one expected a ride, a favor, a cover-up. And without the noise, I started hearing something new, myself. A few days passed, then a week. No emergency calls, no sudden confessions, just stillness. Until I got another message from Megan. I don't blame you. I'd probably have done the same. Just know, not everyone in that room agreed with how you were treated. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I didn't answer right away, but I smiled. Not because it fixed anything, but because the silence was beginning to echo, and not in my apartment, in theirs. From what I heard through a mutual friend, Jessica hosted her daughter's birthday a month later. The decorations were perfect. The cake was 2 tiers, the favors were custom printed, but half the family didn't show. The bounce house didn't fit in their backup venue. Aunt Linda forgot to bring ice. Someone mixed up the RSVPs and people arrived 2 hours late. It wasn't chaos, it was absence. My absence. The absence of the one who used to remember, coordinate, drive, fix, and fund. The one who held it all together while being pushed to the side. They didn't say it out loud, but I could feel it. My silence had volume now, and for once it wasn't me sitting on the outside looking in. It was them, staring into the gap I used to fill. I never got the apology I deserved, but I got something better: clarity. And sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's not explosive. It's not even satisfying in the traditional sense. Sometimes the best revenge is removal. Not to punish, but to heal, to reclaim time, to take your voice back by simply refusing to spend it where it was never heard. And I realized they didn't miss me. They missed the version of me that didn't ask for anything back. That version, she's gone. And I don't think she's coming back. Grief is a strange thing when the person you're mourning is still alive. And family grief? It's quieter, more socially acceptable to swallow than speak. You don't get casseroles or sympathy cards when you stop showing up to Christmas. You get questions, raised eyebrows, silence padded in politeness. But beneath that silence, something else was growing. Me. Not the Rachel they used to know, the girl who brought cupcakes to every birthday, showed up early to help set up chairs, stayed late to wash the dishes, but Rachel version 2, unapologetic, unavailable, unburdened. It started in little ways: a walk around Green Lake with coworkers who used to be just acquaintances, a yes to a last-minute invite for trivia night at a pub where nobody knew my family drama. Then one weekend, Chelsea invited me to join a group heading to the coast. 3 days, 2 cars, no itinerary. I almost said no out of habit, but instead I said, "I'll bring the snacks." We rented a little cabin with a fire pit and terrible Wi-Fi. I shared a bunk bed with Elaine, who snored like a truck but told the best stories at midnight. We drank wine from plastic cups and played card games that turned into therapy sessions, and laughter that left our cheeks sore. One afternoon, as I was walking along the beach, wind tangling my hair and sand cold beneath my bare feet, Chelsea came up beside me. "You're different lately," she said, watching the waves. "In a good way." I smiled. "Feels different." "Not gonna lie," she added. "We used to think you were kind of unreachable." Because I was always working? Because it felt like you were carrying something you didn't want to admit was heavy. I didn't respond at first, just let the ocean answer for me. Then I said quietly, "I think I've finally put it down." That night, back at the cabin, I scrolled through my camera roll. Photos of that week's bonfire. Someone's blurry shot of me mid-laugh, head thrown back, wine in hand. No posing, no makeup, just me. I posted one on Instagram, something I hadn't done in a while. Caption: "Some family you're born into, some you find when you finally look around." Within minutes, Megan liked it, then sent a simple message: "Happy for you." No guilt, no subtext, just a sentence, and that was enough. Back in Seattle, I started hosting my own Sunday dinners. Not elaborate, not themed, just open invitations. Whoever could make it, came. We sat on the floor when the chairs ran out. People brought cheap wine, store-bought pie, nothing curated. One night, halfway through a meal, someone said, "You know what I love about coming here? No one expects you to perform." I didn't cry, but I felt it. That sentence tucked itself into a part of me that used to bend over backward for a seat at someone else's table. Now I had my own. And it was full, not because people needed something from me, but because they chose to be there. Grief doesn't knock when it visits. It doesn't wait for a quiet day or a cleared calendar. It sneaks in when you're loading the dishwasher, halfway through folding laundry, or standing in line at Trader Joe's behind someone who smells like your childhood home. That's how it hit me. I was driving home from the coast, the windows down, sun streaking across my arms, when a song came on the radio, Fleetwood Mac, "Landslide." The same one Mom used to hum while making Sunday dinner, the one Jessica once sang off-key on a road trip to Tahoe when we were still speaking in full sentences. I hadn't heard it in years, and just like that, the air shifted. I pulled over, no tears, just breathless. It was strange. I wasn't sad for the version of my family that hurt me. I was grieving the version I thought existed, the one I kept chasing in memories that only told half the truth, the one I tried to rebuild time and time again, even as it crumbled under its own weight. I sat there in my parked car, fingers drumming the steering wheel, letting the song wash through me. And for the first time, I didn't reach for my phone. Not to text, not to scroll, not to distract. I let the ache settle, Let it remind me that closure isn't always loud or cinematic. Sometimes it's quiet acceptance, knowing the people who hurt you won't ever see it the way you do, and choosing peace anyway. Later that week, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years, Aunt Carol. It was at a bookstore in Capitol Hill, of all places. We both reached for the same hardcover, then froze. She blinked like she was seeing a ghost. "Rachel," she said slowly, "you look good." I smiled. Small, measured. "Thanks. You too." There was an awkward pause. Then, "We miss you, you know." I tilted my head. "What part of me?" Her face softened, and for a moment I thought she might cry, but she didn't. She nodded slowly instead. "Fair question." We chatted for a few minutes about the weather, book clubs, and a dog she just adopted from a shelter. Nothing deep, nothing binding, just two women trying to pretend they were strangers who once shared history. When we said goodbye, she touched my arm gently. "You really do seem lighter." And she was right. I did, because healing doesn't always come from justice or apologies. Sometimes it comes from letting go of the version of you that needed those things to feel whole. I walked home that night through streets I used to rush down. I passed the flower shop Mom loved and didn't stop. I passed the bakery where we'd once ordered Jessica's bridal shower cake and didn't look inside. I just kept walking, not away from anything, but toward myself. The envelope was cream-colored. No return address, just my name in a familiar looping script that instantly made my stomach twist. Jessica. I let it sit on my kitchen counter for 3 days, unopened. Each time I walked past it, a war brewed inside me. Curiosity, resentment, the ghost of something that might have once been love. On the 4th morning, I opened it with a butter knife. Slowly, carefully, as if expecting it to detonate. Inside, a wedding invitation, gold embossed, formal, beautiful. Her son, my nephew Noah, was getting married. And somehow, despite everything, I was invited. Handwritten below the formal card was a note in Jessica's voice, plain and unmistakably hers. "Rachel, it would mean a lot to Noah if you came. No pressure, just think about it." Jess. Think about it? What exactly was I being asked to walk into? I called my best friend, Elaine. "So she finally reached out?" Elaine asked, not bothering to hide the suspicion in her tone. "Technically, yes, but it's not about me. It's about Noah." And how convenient that she needs the aunt with the best job and cleanest reputation to show up just in time for photos. I winced, because she wasn't wrong. Still, a memory surfaced. 6-year-old Noah tugging at my sleeve, asking me to read him the same picture book 4 times in a row. "Again, Auntie Ray," he'd giggle. Was I really about to let Jessica's manipulations cut me off from the one person in that family who had never hurt me? Elena's voice softened. "You can go. If you go for you. Not for them. Not for some fantasy reunion. You walk in knowing who you are. And what you're not going back to." That landed hard. The following week, I RSVP'd yes. Not because I forgave, not because I wanted back in, but because I was no longer the woman who avoided discomfort to keep the peace. I bought a slate blue dress that fit like confidence, booked a one-night stay at a quiet inn 15 minutes from the venue, and chose my seat on the outer edge of the ceremony, visible but not central. When I showed up that morning, I watched from the sidelines as Jessica fluttered around in tailored beige, giving orders with the precision of someone who still believed control could hide chaos. She froze when she saw me. Just a second too long. Then she smiled, brittle. "Rachel, you came." I nodded. No warmth, no coldness. Just truth. "I came for Noah." A flicker of emotion crossed her face. Hurt? Disbelief? Maybe guilt. "He'll be glad you're here." "I hope so." I glanced toward the reception hall. "Let me find my seat." I didn't linger. At dinner, I kept mostly to myself. Small talk with Noah's fiancé's aunt, polite laughter with the couple next to me. I wasn't there to mend bridges. I was there to show myself I didn't need them anymore. When Noah found me during dessert, he wrapped me in the same hug he used to give as a kid. "You showed up," he whispered, eyes a little misty. "I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't," I said honestly, "but I wanted to see you happy, and I am." That moment, simple, unscripted, meant more than any apology Jessica could have faked. It reminded me that sometimes the real healing doesn't come from the people who broke you. It comes from the strength you find by showing up anyway. It happened on a Wednesday, the kind of gray, uneventful day where you expect nothing significant until everything changes. I was sitting at my desk in my studio, brushing a thin coat of resin over a pendant when my phone lit up. Incoming call, Jessica. I stared at the screen. My finger hovered over decline, but I didn't press it. I let it ring. Then I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, a text popped up. "Jessica, can we talk? I think we need to really talk." I could have ignored it, but something inside me, maybe a final thread I hadn't realized was still attached, wanted to hear her out. So I replied, "Me. Tomorrow, 11 a.m., my place, 1 hour. Then I go back to my life." She arrived 5 minutes late, dressed in a pastel blouse and pearl studs, like she was stepping into a church or a courtroom. She looked around my space, walls lined with gemstone necklaces, trays of raw crystals, half-finished sketches. Her eyes softened for a second. "You've built something really beautiful here," she said, almost surprised. "I have," I replied, "because I stopped waiting for anyone else to hand me the tools." She flinched, just slightly. "Rachel, I came because—" She trailed off. "I think I owe you some kind of apology." I folded my arms. "Some kind?" "I wasn't a good sister. Or maybe I was, but only when it was easy." I stayed silent. When Mom and Dad always took my side, I let them. When you stopped showing up, I convinced myself you were the problem. It was easier than facing the fact that I'd made you feel disposable. That word, disposable, it cracked something open. "You didn't just make me feel that way, Jess. You treated me that way. For years. I was the fallback, the emergency contact, the financial crutch, but never the person who mattered." She blinked hard. A tear threatened, but didn't fall. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I really am." I let the silence stretch before speaking. "I appreciate the apology, I do. But this isn't a reunion story. It's a release story." She looked confused. "What do you mean?" I stood, walked over to my workbench, and picked up a necklace I had made just the night before, an aquamarine teardrop framed in silver. "This is for you," I said, handing it over. "You made this?" "I did. It's not a peace offering. It's closure. A symbol of how far I've come. Not to erase the past, but to honor the fact that I survived it." Her hands trembled as she accepted the necklace. "So what happens now?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Now? I go back to my life, the one I built without needing your validation. You're free to do the same. But don't mistake my forgiveness for a reset. We're not starting over. We're closing the loop." She nodded slowly, as if understanding finally began to settle. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We didn't exchange promises we both knew we couldn't keep. She left quietly, and as the door clicked shut behind her, I exhaled, deep, unshaking. For the first time in years, there were no ghosts in the room, only light and silence. And me, fully whole. Finally home. I hadn't planned on writing anything. But late one night, with rain tapping softly against my window and the hum of the city dimmed beneath a thick fog, I opened my laptop and stared at the blank screen. My hands hovered, unsure, until the cursor blinked long enough to become unbearable. So I began typing, like I was writing to ghosts. "Dear Mom and Dad, you probably won't read this. I'm not even sure I want you to. But I need to write it anyway, for me. You once told me that family sticks together no matter what, that blood is thicker than water. But when I needed you to see me, to stand up for me, you chose convenience. You chose silence." I paused, the lump in my throat swelling again. Then I kept going. I used to think if I just tried harder, stayed quiet, gave more, you'd finally see my worth. But all it did was teach me how to disappear. And Jessica? I loved her. I still do, in the way someone loves a memory more than a person. But you all made me feel like a backup generator, only useful when the real power went out. My fingers moved faster now. I'm no longer the version of Rachel you shaped. She's gone. And I'm not mourning her. I've learned to draw boundaries, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. I don't belong to guilt anymore. I don't answer to obligation. This isn't revenge, it's release. I leaned back and closed my eyes, letting the words settle. There was no dramatic music, no cathartic scream, just a soft exhale, a tension in my shoulders slowly loosening after years of holding tight. I hit save, then printed it out, sealed it in an envelope, and wrote across the front in bold black ink, "Not to be sent," because some letters are written for closure, not connection. The next morning, I tucked the envelope inside a keepsake box, the same one that once held birthday cards from my parents, scribbled drawings from Jessica when we were little, and a dried daisy from a long-forgotten childhood hike. I left it all there, not to revisit, but to contain. A museum of a self I'd outgrown. As I slid the lid closed, I whispered, not with anger, not even with grief, but with quiet certainty, "This is where it ends." And for the first time in my life, it truly did. I stood by the window of my new place, barefoot, coffee in hand, listening to the quiet hum of a street I didn't know yet. The sunlight painted long golden streaks across the hardwood floor. No voices, no tension vibrating through the walls, just the soft clink of my spoon against the ceramic mug. Grace hadn't spoken to me since the wedding, not a word, and to be honest, I didn't expect her to. I'd already mourned the version of her I used to believe in. My phone lit up on the counter. A message from her. Grace. "I heard you moved. Are you really done with us?" I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered, then tapped. Me. I'm done abandoning myself. There was no follow-up. Later that afternoon, I took a walk down to the art gallery on Main. A small, independent space where local artists displayed everything from watercolor botanicals to mixed-media grief diaries. There, tucked into the back corner, was the piece I donated, the necklace I'd designed the week after the rehearsal dinner. Silver and sea glass, delicate but unbreakable. A placard read, "Threshold, donated by E. Montgomery. Forged in silence, worn in truth." Behind me, a woman said softly, "I love that. It feels like survival." I turned. She had tear-bright eyes and a gentle smile. I smiled back. "Yeah," I replied. "It is." She didn't ask for more, and I didn't offer it. Some things are spoken best in quiet recognition. As I walked home, dusk settled over the city like a soft blanket. I passed the bakery I hadn't dared to enter during the height of my shame. Now, I went in and bought a slice of lemon tart, just because I wanted it. No explanations, no justification. At home, I lit a candle, placed the tart on a plate, and sat on the couch with a blanket over my knees. I wasn't celebrating a victory, I was honoring a return to myself. There's a strange kind of freedom in letting go of people you once shaped your identity around. It's not clean, it doesn't come with applause or closure or thank yous, but it comes with peace, and peace is loud in its own quiet way. I've learned that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is not fight back, but simply walk away and keep walking. Not out of bitterness, but because you've finally realized you're not someone to be fixed or tolerated, you're someone to be cherished. So if you're listening to this and you're still in the middle of your storm, keep walking. You're not lost. You're just shedding who you're not. If this story moved you, take a moment to hit like, subscribe to the channel for more real stories like this, and drop a comment below, maybe about the moment you chose yourself. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs to hear it today.